So I've looked at the theme of the conference, tangible to intangible. I've made my own little definition of what I think that means. And you will probably be you'll be wondering about the expression that I've put underneath the title, Failing Better. And it comes from my very favourite writer, Samuel Beckett. And one of his favourite quotes is, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail again, fail better." And I think listening to our colleague Lubna, when she talked about limbo, zones of uncertainties, I feel that this is a prescription for how we are finding our way through some incredibly difficult circumstances. And I think it is a recipe for how we need to conduct ourselves and work together. Analysing and understanding the context that we're in, making changes and developments, which comes under trying, evaluating and measuring, and then adapting, and then going through the whole cycle again. Trying, failing, trying again, failing better. And so that's what I will be trying to do. And I hope that I can help and work with Saudi TESOL on behalf of the British Council to continue that cycle of onward improvement and to keep the journey going from tangible to intangible. And what I want to do today is it divides into about 4 sections. So tangible to intangible, I define that in terms of assessment. If you think of paper as tangible, digital as intangible, I want to talk a little bit about the movement from pen and paper tests to digital. And then I'm going to talk again, I'm defining tangible as face-to-face classroom teaching and intangible as remote. So I want to talk about the shift from face-to-face to remote. And then I want to talk about a very recent British Council survey that was done on remote delivery. Now, it wasn't remote delivery to students, it was remote delivery to teachers in terms of professional development. I'm going to talk about some of the findings of that. And my contention is that it very much applies to anyone who's doing remote delivery because it throws up some of the issues, the successes, and some of the ways in which we can go forward. And then I want to talk about support, networks, and resources for teachers, for administrators, and for associations. But before I begin, I want to congratulate Saudi TESOL in a very difficult time. It was born in a very difficult time, December 2020, an extremely successful first event, 700 people there, absolutely fantastic. And congratulations to Saudi TESOL, to Dr. Abdullah and his team for putting all this together today. The British Council hopes to work very closely with Saudi TESOL. I'm really proud to have been invited to talk here today. And I look forward to developing strong and productive relationships going forward. So with that, I'll move on. And I want to begin by referring to a comprehensive learning system. Now, my colleague, Barry O'Sullivan, that many of you will have heard of, he's the head of the assessment research for the British Council, has developed what he calls a comprehensive learning system. And I think it is something that we all need to bear in mind as we talk about various aspects of our learning systems. And I compare the comprehensive learning system to a tricycle. And if you've ever ridden a tricycle, you will know that if one of the wheels is broken, the tricycle doesn't work. And there are 3 wheels to the comprehensive learning system. That's assessment and curriculum and delivery. If you can have a good curriculum, you can have a good assessment system. If your delivery system is poor, the whole thing won't work. And it's the same with assessment, and it's the same with curriculum. So while my expertise and my focus is on assessment, I must always bear in mind, and I would ask you to bear in mind, that it is a holistic system and you can't really address one of these facets of it without addressing them all. I want to talk about some trends and responses in assessment. And of course, I was in India when the pandemic struck, and we had to find, both in teaching and in assessment, we had to make responses. The first point I want to make is that the movement from pen and paper to computer delivered has been going for quite some time and was well in play before the pandemic started. And the reasons for that are that it is, we have done numerous studies that say that the quality of assessment systems is enhanced with computer delivered assessments. It's faster, it can be delivered on demand, it can be centralized, it can be more accurate. Marking and assessments are standardized. So generally, quality goes up. Of course, underneath that, there are cost considerations, and you can imagine there are considerable cost savings in terms of venues and paper, for instance, in switching from a pen and paper to a computer delivered test. The way that it was moving, and we all know examples that the big professional exams, CFA, ACCA, were moving to computer delivered. IELTS, which I'm very heavily involved in, developed a computer delivered test. TOEFL and PTE, the two big English tests. PTE is only computer delivered. TOEFL is mostly computer delivered. So the shift was happening. But what I would contend is that has been greatly accelerated by the conditions created by the pandemic. What was driving the speed of it before was customer sentiment. Did people want to shift to pen and paper? And there is evidence that there was quite a bit of resistance to computer delivered. In Europe and Americas, the uptake was very high. In other places, for instance, China and Korea, and some countries in the Middle East as well, uptake and the willingness to shift from pen and paper to computer delivered was less evident. Maybe something to do with the scripts that in Europe and Americas, the first language has a Latin script, makes keyboards easier, it makes shifting to computers easier. China, Korea, KSA, for example, the first L1 language is in a different script, and that may have had some kind of effect. This movement has been accelerated by current circumstances, and I'll be going on to other developments. A second aspect, and I think directly resulting from the pandemic, has been a movement to remote proctoring. In the British Council, we've got a remote proctoring test with our APTIS test. Other testing institutions have developed remote proctoring in order to deal with the fact that lockdown conditions make it very, very difficult to have gatherings. And so there is a scramble, if you like, for at-home tests. However, this itself as well is quite problematic. There has been quite a deal of resistance to remote proctoring. There are issues. I refer to a study done in the US by Hodges in Florida that talks about connectivity from the home as a serious issue in remote proctoring. Bandwidth for remote proctoring solutions it tends to be very high, and a lot of people just haven't got the equipment or the bandwidth at home. Human and pet intrusions. Being a dog owner, I have at times been intruded on myself by pets, but often family members. The conditions in the home mitigate against effective remote proctoring. And then there are serious issues with privacy. And if you look and Google remote proctoring, you will see there is quite a deal of resistance and suspicion in and around that. So while we've got some factors pushing, we've also got some factors pulling against these issues. And the other boost, if you like, that the pandemic has given to assessment is the use of artificial intelligence. Again, very problematic, the use of artificial intelligence in remote proctoring, where databases are gathered on behaviour and even things like monitoring eye movements to suspect whether or not the candidate is being assisted. Again, this makes remote proctoring quite problematic. However, an area that has been boosted and is coming to the fore is the use of artificial intelligence for the marking of productive skills. Obviously, we use machine marking for the receptive skills because they tend to be yes/no answers and very discrete, can be done by machine. There was always an issue with productive skills in that they are much more subjective and require human intervention. But artificial intelligence is moving ahead in leaps and bounds, and it is quite possible that there will be an AI-guided assessment solution or some assessment solutions that can deliver assessment of productive skills as efficiently as human beings. They're basically the kind of movements in assessment. This is a report that was done in 2020, which actually throws a little bit of doubt on online learning because it causes an absence of face-to-face relationships. And this is something I will come back to time and time again, that what is often discounted in the face-to-face classroom situation are things like non-verbal communications, feedback between learners and feedback between learners and teachers, and also the whole social relationship aspect of a classroom situation and the absence of that in an online situation. And this points us towards the issues that we all need to address. I would give as an example of ways that this can be addressed and is being addressed in the example of the flipped classroom, and it was mentioned a little bit earlier, flipped classroom in shifting inputs and materials to an asynchronous platform in order to use the synchronous space, that is when students are together, to develop collaboration, to develop interaction, to use group work and personalization to overcome the absence of face-to-face relationships. And I would stress once again that it's the relationship issue which feeds into motivation, which is going to be the determining factor as to whether online learning is successful or not. Another challenge that we might all think about, Hodges in the same report I referred to earlier, talks about the difference between emergency remote teaching and effective online learning. Now, I would put these 2 points as the different ends of a spectrum. I think the suddenness of the pandemic, this very sudden closure of schools, the closing down of school system, the restrictions on gathering through around the world. I'm not talking particularly about KSA or any particular country, but around the world, institutions, educational institutions, ministries were thrown into a situation of emergency remote teaching. There was a lot of just throwing things onto an online platform and then telling teachers get on with it. On the other, that's at one end of the spectrum, and this is where I refer back again to trying, failing, trying again, failing better. I think that we are all, as teachers, as assessors, as administrators, as decision makers, we are all somewhere on this spectrum between emergency remote teaching and effective online learning. Effective online learning just to kind of summarize there, demands a considered analysis of the system, that is curriculums, materials, task types, but overall behaviours. We need to understand what kinds of teacher behaviours need to change to have effective online learning. What kind of changes do learners need to make in their behaviour in order to benefit from an online learning opportunity or remote education? And now I'd like to move on to talk a little bit about a survey that the British Council has done looking at remote delivery of professional development opportunities for teachers. It was done, there were 4 case studies that they used in 4 different countries. I'm not referring to the countries or the case studies, but I'm instead, in a very summarising kind of way, I'm just going to have a look at some of the conclusions, and I hope that some of the conclusions and the themes that have emerged from this research might be useful to us as educators and assessors going forward along that journey towards effective online education. Quite clearly, this is referring to teachers, but I would say that it crosses over into learners. Learners can learn effectively through remote development. Obviously, I'm not saying obviously, actually, sometimes the obvious is not very obvious. Induction, explanation, for instance, how are instructions given? How are they checked? And then how is ongoing support provided? Again, addressing the relationships issue that we referred to in the absence of face-to-face, synchronous sessions, very valuable in fostering peer-to-peer interaction and motivating learners to improve outcomes. The teachers said that they preferred face-to-face to remote. However, given the circumstances, they appreciate and value learning online. What are some of the things that we need to take into account in order to make effective remote delivery? Regular structure, learners benefit from knowing what's going to happen to them rather than everything being a surprise. And then digital tools, which goes back to my tricycle, the curriculum part of my tricycle, materials and curriculum. And again, it's about educating both teachers, learners, in terms of the use of the digital and the tools that exist. Flipped model I've referred to, so that tasks are done prior to the synchronous sessions, so that synchronous sessions can be much more devoted to building the relationships and creating providing motivating tasks. And then, again, it's the organised asynchronous platform to support work in conjunction. Teachers, for here we could say learners, what are the key contributions? Getting to know the learners, personalising in the synchronous sessions, specific roles in the group, and then opportunities in both synchronous and asynchronous environments for peer-to-peer sharing. People have mentioned, I think someone mentioned Mentimeter in the chat before, quizzes, polls, and then WhatsApp has played an incredible role in online education. It helps with the interpersonal interactions, it enables the flipped learning and enhances communication. And then again, both for learners and practitioners, and something that I could very well benefit from, basic digital induction and training. Very, very important that people are able to manipulate the environment to get the best out of it as they proceed. I probably don't need to tell you this, but yes, the pandemic has supercharged the development and the need for remote learning in professional development, but across the board. Going back to the face-to-face issue, collaboration is extremely important. And then again, going back to the widespread use of tools as an emerging theme. And I just want to say a couple of words about online education and my notion that we're moving from emergency remote learning into effective online learning. The future is in online, both in assessment and in teaching. That online systems, if we continue to respond, to evaluate, to adjust, and to adapt, online learning can provide inclusion across the board. It can cut costs of education incredibly. It can provide an incredibly scalable education model, and it can provide access to best practice and the best pedagogy in the world to anyone in the world if it is managed correctly. So the two movements that I spoke about, the movements to online in assessment and the movements to online in teaching, were occurring prior to the pandemic. They've been accelerated in the pandemic, and they will continue after the pandemic. And we are moving towards a world where education is going to be increasingly online. Again, there's a plus and a minus here. The emerging themes, again, from the research, were that innovation was spurred, and I think that is one of the effects of a crisis. In that kind of situation, innovation thrives, and we've seen it. We've seen it in the Madarasati programs that Dr. Maha presented, and we're seeing it amongst all of our professionals in all contexts. So one good thing about a crisis is that it spurs creativity. And there was a theme there where there is an issue with cameras. I won't say very much about that, but there is, as there is with remote proctoring, there are some kinds of issues with cameras that need to be addressed, and solutions need to be found.